All right, today we've got a brand new video. We're going to be doing Little Ancient Greece, and we'll talk about Alexander and his Macedonian kingdom. Can't wait to get started. So here we go. Vocabulary to start. So we got to know some words when we talk about Greece. So when we refer to the city-states of Greece, they would call themselves polis, right? That is just another term for city-state. Remember, a city-state is just the city plus the land all around it. Oligarchy. Spartans will use this, and you'll hear this phrase like in modern politics too. So it's when the few rule over the many. In the case of Sparta, it was two warrior kings. Uh, Greeks had slaves, something that we really need to make sure that we understand, because when you watch like the movie 300, it shows like the Persians as the evil guys and the Greeks as the good free loving guys. Not necessarily as simple as that, right? This is a slave-based society. Particularly in Sparta, they use the term helot. A direct democracy, we'll enact that in class, but a direct democracy essentially is putting all of the political power in the hands of the average citizen. This case, though, is male citizens only. Women were not allowed to vote, and we're talking ancient Athens when we talk about a democracy. A phalanx is a way of fighting that you'll see in Mankind, the Story of Us, with the interlocking shields, everyone drilled together. It creates this sort of human tank effect. And then last but not least, you'll be studying myths in English, and we'll also do some myth work in this class. So, geography. First thing to know about with Greece, mountains. We've got to know it. So the Greeks have a mountainous climate. They are surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea, of course, and so that's going to allow for some trade. And the Athenians are going to be known for their navy, who were able to navigate that sea. So again, think about the mountains, know the mountains, and what does that effect do? Well, the mountains kind of divide the different city-states. That's why Athens is so different from Sparta, because they weren't able to travel easily amongst city-states, right? And so because you're not able to travel easily, that makes them very different societies. Okay, so before we talk about Athens and Sparta, that's why you're here, right? Well, let's start with the forerunners of the Greeks. Like, who came first? And so you've got the Minoans. This is on the island of Crete, so right in the south there. You've got the island of Crete right down in the bottom there. The Crete people are a matriarchy, so that means women are at the front and center of power. They're making the decisions. They have a lot more say in the politics of society. And Crete is where that myth that you may have heard of, the myth of the Minotaur, comes in. So the Minotaur is a monster that little kids are fed to, and pretty horrible, right? That's the Greeks for you. They take tribute every year from all these different city-states, and so what happens is Theseus, one of the heroes in Greek history, is going to go in and say, enough is enough, I'm going to destroy this Minotaur, and he works with this girl Ariadne, who is a princess of the Minoan society. Basically goes in, slays the Minotaur, and Ariadne gives him a little ball of string, and so that allows him to exit where the Minotaur is. And where is the Minotaur? Well, it's called the Labyrinth, so it's like this huge maze. So people always said, like, you might be able to defeat the Minotaur, probably not, but you might, and even if you do, you're going to be lost forever in the maze. So this Ariadne helps him, and eventually Theseus gets out of the labyrinth. Of course, now Ariadne wants to go with Theseus. She's in love with him, and so they leave. And what does Theseus do? He leaves this poor little girl on the island because, well, he wasn't really attracted to her, didn't think she was all that pretty. He just leaves her on this deserted island called Naxos, and as a result, Theseus comes back, and the gods punish Theseus for this action. He forgets to change his sails in his haste. He has these like black sails, and that was supposed to signal to his father that like he had died. And so because he didn't change the sails over, his father plunges himself into the depths of the Aegean Sea. That's why the sea is called the Aegean Sea, because his father was King Aegeus. We'll do more of that in class, but that's sort of like the quick wrap around to it. And so Theseus is punished for his treatment of poor Ariadne, who helped him defeat the Minotaur. There's always this tragedy in all these myths. All right, next. So if that's the matriarchy, that is the Minoans and the Minotaur. Okay, let's go over to the warlike Messenians. Messenians are going to be famous for developing their figure eight style shield for battle. They've got a very militaristic society. By the way, kids always say, like, it's a figure eight. No, it looks like a peanut shell. It's just supposed to, like protect your top and bottom, right? So it's a very particular Messenian style. Very militaristic society, high-walled cities, all this sort of thing. The Messenians are actually really famous from the blind poet Homer. Homer is the one who wrote this famous book called the Iliad. I encourage you to read it sometime in your academic career. It's incredible, and it's this great story that the Greeks have sort of woven together. And essentially, the Messenians go over. They're looking to reclaim their beauty Helen, who decides she doesn't want to be with King Agamemnon, and so she wants this like love that she has for a kid named Paris, and so back and forth they go. But essentially, the Messenians go over to the city of Troy, where Helen has escaped to reclaim their bride or something like that. And they send their greatest warrior, Achilles, to try to reclaim the city. Achilles fights against the hero of Troy. His name is Hector, and the two battle together. Now Achilles is like as close to a godlike warrior as you can think. They say when he was a baby, you see the painting there. It's actually pretty horrible when you look at it closely. The baby is being dipped into the river Styx. Everything but his heel was dipped, and so he's like godlike except for that heel, right? That's his one weakness. And Achilles defeats Hector. He actually takes Hector's body, puts him on a chariot, and rides him around in a circle because he's just so angry, but also celebrating his victory. Pretty brutal stuff. But the people of Troy have walls that just cannot be penetrated by any siege, and they're fine inside the city. So the Messenians have to come up with a strategy, and so Agamemnon and some of his advisors come together, and they basically say, instead of the 1v1 me strategy has not worked. That's the Messenian tactic of one warrior versus one, and whoever wins the whole battle. It's like the 1v1 strategy is not working. They're still not quitting. So let's give them a gift. And the gift is the Trojan horse. Of course, inside that horse, this Trojan horse, if you will, is the warriors of the Messenians, including Achilles. And so the people of Troy come out. They see this giant wooden horse on the beach, and they're like, oh, really cool. They must have quit. The Messenians are gone. And this is, of course, hubris, right? So like same method kind of coming through. They're overconfident. They're arrogant. And so Achilles sneaks into the city, opens up the gates, and they slaughter everybody. However, in this battle, Achilles is shot by the Trojan hero Paris, this young kid, in the heel, of course, and that's what leads to Achilles' demise, ultimately. So that's the end of Troy and the end of the Iliad. At least that's like Cliff Notes version, guys. It's a whole book, so like go read it. Don't just listen to me. All right, so now we've got our Minoans. Those are your matriarchy. You've got your Messenians, your 1v1 me bro, your militarist, your early like unified Greek society. Now let's talk about how these different city-states develop. We're going to just spotlight Athens and Sparta because those are the two major in our curriculum that we want to cover. There's many others. You've got your Thebans, you've got your Argos, just a bunch of different city-states. Here we go. Let's start with the Athenians. So these are your nerds, right? These are the smart ones, if you will, though, each city-state's got its own smart people, of course. I'm just generalizing. It's fun. But Athens is going to use this direct democracy system. So that's all men would come together, and like if they were going to go to war, they'd cast stones. And depending on the color stone, let's say the dark stones were for war, and then the light stones were for peace, whatever, it doesn't really matter. They would cast their different stones, and if there were more dark stones than light, then war it would be. And so that's how they kind of went back and forth. They allowed people to talk over political decisions. But it was very much a patriarchy. I mean, the women were kept in the homes. They were encouraged to raise the kids, and that's about it. They didn't have any voice in this in this government. They were even seen as inferior to men, and just kind of like that was the patriarchal society that the Athenians had created. So there's some positives, right, with the direct democracy, right, great idea, and then there's this like, you know, blatant sexism that's found throughout the Athenian society. And remember, these people use slaves. You got to keep that in the back of your mind, so as not to find this like hero versus villain. You've got to walk the middle ground. That's what we try to do in this class. All right, their leader is Pericles, and Pericles is going to build Athens into the strong navy that it was, perhaps the strongest navy in all of Greece. So that's what Pericles was able to offer. He's also a patron of the arts and helps encourage that artistic growth within Athens. Athens is home to philosophy, so you've got two basic lines of philosophy, the Stoics, which is what most of the Greek philosophers would fall into. So Stoics, life is driven by fate. They're very much in control of their emotions, and just believe that things happen for a reason. I'm sure you've heard that in your life. And then on the other side, you've got the Epicureans. They believe that we have a lot more control over our own fate, that we can sort of make our own future. And this is dangerous in a world where the Greeks are controlled by the gods, they believe, and the gods are interceding on their lives and a key part of their lives, and always, you know, messing with mortals, you know. So to be an Epicurean is really more of a dangerous thing, right? And so ultimately, you've got these three philosophers here, Socrates, who dares to be an Epicurean in a world of Stoics, and he tries to tell his students to always be asking questions. That's how he led his debates. So instead of, you know, a teacher telling you information, right, Socrates would always ask his students questions and let them sort of come to their conclusions. It's like an inquiry model. Very, very interesting way of teaching. I'm sure he used lecture too, and then you've got Plato. Plato is a student of Socrates. He's going to write this great book called The Republic, and he comes up with a lot of different theories. It's a whole book, but one of them that I think is really interesting is called the Philosopher Kings. Basically, the idea is that we should be ruled by the best of the best. The most educated amongst us should be the ones in control, not necessarily a popularity contest, more of like you're qualified because you are wiser than the rest of us. And very, very interesting. All right, next you've got Aristotle, and Aristotle is the last of the three philosophers. He's going to actually teach Alexander the Great, so sort of hold on to that, and he's going to teach our Alexander like to love Greek culture. It's one of the defining features of Alexander. So those are your three philosophers to at least be aware of, right? Okay, let's talk more about the culture of Greece. So you've got your wonderful sculptures that you see here. And you'll see too, like they try to capture the myths of the day. So you know, fighting against the Minotaur here is Theseus. You've got Heracles there, or Hercules as you probably know him, right? Heracles is fighting against Cerberus, the three-headed dogs. You'll watch Hercules in my class, so you'll be familiar with this one. And of course, not every Greek person had an 8-pack and was a bodybuilder, okay? What the Greeks believed is that sculpture was about capturing humans in their perfect form, like capturing man in their best of stages. Not necessarily true, not necessarily like what they actually look like, right? But what they could be. And I guess that was the way that they believed art. Like, what could man be in its highest level? That's what art was supposed to be. They had these giant amphitheaters where they would go out and watch different comedies or tragedies. This isn't like Netflix. You can't just keep scrolling through. Okay, you've either got you're laughing or you're crying, right? That's sort of how they ran their different theaters. And they had these really creepy masks so that people could see their features from far away, because if you're in the nosebleeds, if you're way in the back, you know, it's really hard to see. They had different ways to amplify their voices, all that sort of stuff. So, and some of these masks are really creepy. All right, gods to be aware of. You've got in Athens, of course, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, 2 parts. By the way, very ironic that people who said women are inferior would highlight Athena as the most important goddess for them. So there's all those, hypocrisies. They had the Olympic games to honor all the gods, but Zeus, of course, being the most important one to honor. And so you've got the three brothers. You've got Zeus, you've got Poseidon, and you've got Hades. Those are the three brothers, right? So Zeus of the sky, Poseidon of the seas, and then Hades gets the underworld, which kind of resented a little. And then Athena, you've got your goddess of wisdom and war, and then Ares, god of war. He was particular to the Spartans. These are the gods that I would like you to know. If you know more than this, then that's really super duper cool. But those are the five that I'd like you to be familiar with. Okay, this makes them a polytheistic society. They worship many gods. All right, so that's Athens. Let's go over to Sparta. In Sparta, you've got in the south, they're across the Peloponnesian Peninsula. So that Peloponnesian Peninsula, if I could sort of mark it for you here. So you've got this little peninsula here. It's not going to let me mark, is it? Let's see. Well, folks, it's not marking, but it's right in the center here. I'm hoping you can see that. Between Athens and between Sparta is this little land strip there. And that's how they would, sort of, come back and forth, or Athens would take ships. Doesn't really matter. Okay, let's keep moving. Ruled by an oligarchy of warrior kings. You've got Leonidas as the most famous of them. And so they had slaves within their society. This allowed women to not have to work in the homes. Like in Athens, women were relegated to the homes, but in Sparta, women were allowed to kind of be out and about. They were supposed to be strong, and so they were encouraged to work out because they thought if a woman was strong, the baby would be strong. Now, we know that's not exactly how things work, but that's how the Spartans saw it. And certainly it can't hurt, right? So the women are out there. They were encouraged to raise the kids for the first 7 years of their lives. And this kind of develops a bond. And this is a theory of mine. I can't prove it or anything. But because of that first 7 years with the women of Sparta, along with the kids, being sort of attached to the hip, teaching them the myths, teaching them the ways to be. I think that there develops a unique bond between the Spartan women and their kids. And I think that because of that, the Spartan boys, when they grow up, they're going to, for sure, give their women a little bit more respect in their society. Now, you've got a group of elders called ephors that once they're 7 years old, I always think of that Lucas Graham song, Once I Was 7 Years Old, right? The ephors take over, and these elders are going to run military school. It's called an agoge. They are going to learn to be warriors. And of course, in the agoge, they're highlighting Ares the most. They talk about all the other gods too, I'm sure, but Ares is the one that they're really going after here. Now, these 7 years old boys, they can't wear shoes, they've got a cloak, and they're learning how to survive. That's it. They want to fight within the phalanx, not be a weak link. They're learning fighting, they're learning stealing, they're learning how to be a cog in this machine and ultimately to become hoplite. A hoplite is a warrior that fights in phalanx. You can't be weak, and so the society is all about strength. To that end, they practice infanticide. If a baby was born deformed, they would throw them off of a mountain. Really brutal, evil stuff, right? But this is a different people than you and I, right? Okay. At 20, so 7 years old, you start learning how to fight, steal, hurt other kids, right? You grow up by 20 years old, you join secession. Secession is a small group of soldiers that are with each other, sometimes even romantically involved, because they're more at war than they are at home. And so it's like this very close bond that these guys have with one another. They're often, in foreign countries, fighting, warring with different city-states, and so this is Spartan culture. It is warlike. It is a powerful society. Not much of the plays and the comedies, tragedies of Athens, right? So more of the jocks of society, more of the athletes, shall we say. So now let's go to the Peloponnesian Wars, and this is where we're going to see this sort of brotherhood and then this collapse of that. So Let's begin with, remember, Persia. Persia is the empire of toleration out in the east, and the Persians essentially hear some rumors going on. And the rumors are essentially that there's a group of Greeks called the Ionian Greeks, and they're being told across the Mediterranean, right? It's literally across the Aegean Sea. They're being told by perhaps Athens, perhaps some of the other city-states, that they should revolt, that Ionia should not be a client state to Persia, they shouldn't pay their tribute, etc. And so whether or not, Athens actually did this or not, or how much of it they actually said, it's hard to say, but ultimately that's the rumor. And so rather than go after the Ionians, the Persians say they're going to go to the source. They're going to go to Athens. And so they send out all of these delegates, these diplomats, over to the city-states because they want Athens, right? But they also want to make sure none of the other city-states get in the way. And so they send out these diplomats and they ask for earth and water as tribute, and say that, ultimately, if you follow us and you support us, we'll leave you alone and we'll just collect our tribute just like we always would, because that's what the Persians do. And ultimately, the Spartans reject this. They actually kick their diplomat down a well. They say that there's a bunch of earth and water down there. You can go get that. And they refuse the Persian diplomacy. And so the Persians send their fighting force. Their fighting force is led by King Xerxes, King of Kings Xerxes, I should say, right? And his immortals. And the immortals, if you recall, are so numerous a fighting force that it seems like they never die. The Athenians, for their own right, have no way of defeating Persia one-on-one, and they ask the Spartans, who have gotten on the bad side of the Persians now, they ask them for help, and they form an alliance. It's called the Delian League. And the Delian League, named after this island called Delos, which we'll get to in a little bit, is in a league of Greek brotherhood. Basically, the Greeks are going to come together. They're going to fight for freedom, even though they're all slave owners, right? They're going to fight for freedom against the Persians. And so the Athenians tell the Spartans, we need your help. And the Persians land near Sparta, and they're essentially saying that we're coming for you, Athens, and the Spartans have to make a great stand. Basically, what the Spartans do is at this famous pass called Thermopylae in here, what they're going to do is they're going to buy their brothers time. King Leonidas of Sparta and his 300 warriors come together at a mountain pass, and they just hold out. It looks something like this from the movie 300. There's this narrow mountain pass. They hold out against the thousands of immortals. Ultimately, the Spartans are betrayed, and they're betrayed by a helot who comes to the Persian side and says, "Hey, I know a way around the mountain pass." And so the Persians are able to get around and ultimately totally surround Leonidas. But he and all of his men are butchered. They're killed there. All 300 are killed. But they bought the Athenians some time. They slowed down the Persian advance, right? That was their sacrifice. This allowed Athens enough time to build some ships and gather resources, and the rest of the Spartan force was able to meet up with the Athenians. And if you ever want to watch a really action-packed movie that isn't really historically accurate in the sense of depicting the Persians the way they are, 300 is a really cool movie. Just don't take it too seriously. The Persians aren't the evil guys. The Greeks aren't just the good guys. It's more nuanced than that, I think. Now, the Athenians and Spartans come together at the Battle of Marathon, and at Marathon they use the phalanx together. They use the ships. They come together, fight together as Greek brothers against the Persians, and they are able to defeat these Persian immortals at the Battle of Marathon. So the phalanx really works. The Delian League shows that they now, Greek brothers, the Persian wars are over. The Persians actually are going to give them a bunch of gold to end it. That's how a war ends in ancient times. And now the question is, who leads the Delian League? They couldn't just do it splitting time, sharing is caring, right? Who is the master of the Delian League? And so the Spartans say, well, we sacrificed at Thermopylae, so it should be us. And the Athenians are like, well, we're smarter. We're the brains of the operation. We put together the strategy, so it should be us. And so back and forth they go, and it creates some really bad blood between the two. And here's where Athens makes some pretty awful decisions, I think. These, smart, cultured people, they decide they're going to put the treasure on Delos. All of this gold that they got from the Persians, they'll put it on the little island of Delos. Remember, that's where the league name comes from, the Delian League. And so they'll put it on Delos for safekeeping. And of course, who can get to Delos easiest but the Athenians, because they're the people that have the ships, right? Spartans aren't really great at doing that. And so it's like over there, safekeeping, and then of course the money starts going missing. And where is the money going? Well, the money actually is used to build that thing called the Parthenon, which you see here, which you've probably seen in your life before. It's this great building that the Athenians built to honor their gods, to honor Athena and Zeus and all the rest. So they're like taking the glory of the gods from the Spartans, and they're using this money, which should have been all of their money collectively, for this grand building that really is a testament to Athenian greed in the end. And it's Athens that wants all the glory from the gods. They didn't put it in a neutral site, they put it on Athenian soil. So that's going to make the Spartans upset. Then the Athenians go around to all these different islands. Remember, they're the navigators, the sailors, and they start saying, hey, if a war breaks out, we want you to join us. We want you to be on the side of Athens. Just kind of like culling support towards their side for a war that may or may not happen. They're alliance building. And this upsets the Spartans. And they hear about this horrible thing where the people of Melos say, we don't want nothing to do with it. We want to be neutral. And well, neutrality wasn't really an option. So the Athenians come in and they essentially just slaughter the island. They enslave the women and children. Like it's horrific stuff, guys. And the Spartans are like, this is evil. Okay, this is going to affect us because now you're like encircling us with enemies, and so they decide they want to go to war. The Spartans decide that they're going to make a decision, though, on this war. So they go in and they attack Athens, right? And Athens just sits there on his walled cities. They back up into the walled cities and they, wait it out. They're sitting there saying to themselves, eventually the Spartans will have to give up. We'll hold out against the siege. Pericles is holding out in the city, right? And so the Spartans also have this other problem where the Athenians are bringing in supplies, because remember, they're the naval superpower of their day, and so they have supplies coming in, so the siege isn't going to work. If you keep bringing supplies in, then they won't get starved out. You understand the problem? And so because of that, the Spartans go back to an old enemy. And if you've ever heard the phrase like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, some version of that, right? The Spartans go to Persia and they ask for golds, and they say, will you give us some gold so we can defeat the Athenians? Now, if you recall from the beginning of this whole thing, right, wasn't it the Athenians who had spread rumors to Ionia? So the Persians hate the Athenians and they want revenge, and this is the way that they're going to get it. So basically the Persians go ahead and give the gold to Sparta so they can destroy Athens, and that gold is being used to build boats so that they can attack the boats of Athens and prevent any supplies from coming in. And that's successful. They build the boats, they go to war, and it's a success. Okay, and using that Persian gold, basically the Athenians are now stuck. They don't get supplies coming into the city anymore, and they starve out. A great disease breaks through. Some ancient writers say that this is the disease of betrayal. Ultimately, the Athenians fall, the Peloponnesian Wars are over, and it's at great cost to both the Spartans and Athenians. They're now a weak, fractured people. They are weak enough that their northern neighbors are going to come in. It's like once you have a civil war, and that's sort of what it was. Greece was never exactly unified, but the Delian League had provided some unity. Without that league, without that unity, now they're isolated city-states again. Now they're weak. So here's your quick sum up, and you've got to make sure that you're able to do the Peloponnesian Wars in your own words, like sort of bring it from beginning to end. But here's a nice little summary, if you will. Okay. So let's talk about those Macedonians. I'm almost done here. Let's talk about one of my favorite people to study in all of history, and that is Alexander the Great. So I'm going to show you a picture of Alexander here. This is like a AI, recreation, but they think that Alexander may have had two different colored eyes based on the ancient accounts. Of course, we're not, exactly sure, but that's what some people say. So let's begin with Alexander, who will be called Alexander the Great. Here it begins with his father and his mother. So to start, his father is Philip II of Macedonia. You might hear it too as Macedonia. We'll say Macedonia. That's the sort of like modern interpretation. I wasn't there, so I'm not really sure exactly if it's Macedon or Macedon. But Philip II, Philip with two eyes in his name, but he's only got one eye there. He was a warrior. They called him Philip the Barbarian because the Macedonians were like Greek adjacent. They were kind of like the hillbillies, if you will, of Greek culture. Some people said weren't exactly Greek. Some people said, like the philosophers, they would criticize Macedon and say you couldn't buy a good slave in Macedonia, which was like a really huge insult to the Macedonians and one that they wouldn't forget. So Philip II builds up this powerful army. He's got these sarissa, which we'll take notes on a little bit later, these really long spears, which made his phalanx better and more powerful than any other phalanx that he went up against. He could get there first with the spear. The spear was longer than the Greek hoplite spears. And he had his professional army. So the Greeks used like sort of like a militia, kind of like if you've studied like American history, like the Minutemen, kind of like quick to the point warriors that were farmers, but then could become warriors at a given notice. His soldiers were professionals. This is something that the Romans will copy later. It's what makes his army so much more powerful. Now he is going to marry a foreign queen, or foreign princess, I should say, an Olympias. Initially, probably a marriage of love, and then becomes very toxic. And his mother, Olympia, well, they said that she worshipped snakes. She was kind of like a seeress, or maybe you would say like a witch today or something. Not sure how true that is, but that she was like always around snakes. Philip one time went to go to their bedchamber, and he sees a bunch of snakes on the bed and like flips out and leaves her alone. He's like creeped out by this lady. Well, Olympias gives birth to Alexander, and she tells Alexander, and I think this is something you can learn from in this story, right? She tells Alexander, you are special. Like, she sets the expectations for him so high, right? Like, you are the son of and bloodline to Achilles, because that was her family's lineage. They claimed Achilles' bloodline, right? And she said, and your father was actually Zeus. You have the blood of Zeus and the blood of Achilles flowing through you. It's even debated as whether or not he even, claimed Philip as his father sometimes. He really fell into this idea that like, no, Zeus was my father, and therefore I am divine. Get the blood of the greatest warrior and the greatest god. And so these expectations fueled Alexander early on. He believed he was destined for greatness. One time, it was said that this great horse, Bucephalus, this untamable beast, by the way, was supposed to, be butchered because, well, it was just untamable. No one could deal with this horse. And Alexander, this young boy, gets on top of Bucephalus, is able to ride Bucephalus. Philip buys it for him, and ultimately Bucephalus follows Alexander into every battle. It would make a great bonus question on your test, right? Bucephalus the Untamable. He's able to ride the horse that no one else is. For ancient historians, it's like a moment where you say, oh my God, this guy is great, or is going to be great, right? It's like something that you can say is a foreshadowing moment for him. He was taught by some of the greatest teachers. So first, his name was Leonidas. Leonidas helped him become a warrior. Leonidas taught him how to master Bucephalus and really ride him into battle, because at this time there's no stirrups, there's no thing to put your feet into, so it's like you have to be really strong to be able to hold on to your horse. Your thighs have to be really strong to be able to hold on to your horse while you're carrying a sword and spear and maybe bow and arrow, whatever. So that's Leonidas. And by the way, not Leonidas of the 300. That guy's dead. The Persians killed him, right? So Leonidas is just a very popular name. So was Alexander, by the way. Okay, so Alexander is also taught by Aristotle. If you remember him, I just spoke about him, right? He's one of the 3 great philosophers. He learned from Socrates, who, by the way, had to take poison rather than, exclaim that he was a Epicurean. He was, somebody who believed in Epicureanism and didn't want to become a liar. And so he said, no, I'm an Epicurean. I'm not a Stoic. I believe that we are driven by our free choices. And basically they said either shut up or take your own life. And Socrates took his own life. So that's the lineage of Aristotle, right? This like powerful, hard-headed teacher. And Aristotle's learned from him and learned from Plato by proxy. So that's Alexander's teacher, one of the best teachers in all of the world. Now, how did Aristotle get the job? Well, Philip destroyed his whole community, and so Aristotle kind of didn't have a choice. But basically, Aristotle worked it out that Philip would rebuild his community if he was Alexander's tutor. So that was the deal he got. All right, now Philip he has this terrible marriage. There's this love interest in his life. It was very common that Macedonians had multiple wives, and so he took on multiple wives. That upset Olympia so much because he took on a younger wife and had a kid with this younger wife. So now Alexander is in jeopardy because now there's a rival heir to the throne. And so it all sort of comes to a head. Philip, one of his maybe male love interests, has something terrible happen to him and blames Philip for it. And so ultimately Philip is assassinated. This guy that Philip was romantically involved with kills him at a coronation ceremony where he's supposed to go on a campaign across to Persia, and they kill him in that moment. Philip kept bodyguards away besides this one guy, and the one guy betrays him. Now they think that Olympias may have worked with this guy because there was horses ready for him to leave, so maybe Olympias kind of worked with this dude to set it all up. We're not really sure though. That's speculation, of course. Olympia never admitted to it, of course. And we don't think Alexander knew about it, so he probably suspected that Olympias had something to do with it, because his mother was a powerful figure, really powerful woman. In any event, with Philip's death, Alexander becomes king. He is about 20 years old when he takes the throne, and he decides to carry on his father's legacy. What he's going to do is he's going to expand, and he takes his best friend Hephaestion with him. Keep that name in the back of your mind. Hephaestion is Alexander's best friend throughout this whole history and whole story. So they go to war and they go to battle. The first place that he's going to try to take is he's going to try to take Egypt, and so he does. He crowns himself Pharaoh, which is incredible, right? We're talking about cultural diffusion, right? He then decides he's going to take on the great King of Kings, and the King of Kings at this time is named Darius III. Darius III has the immortals, and so he fights against them at this famous battle called Gaugamela, defeats Darius. Darius runs, and then Darius is actually killed by his own people. In any event, Alexander is going to, once he takes over Persia, he's going to start settling a bunch of cities. And so in Egypt, he has Alexandria. He has a bunch of different Alexandrias, but this is the one, when I refer to Alexandria, I'm referring to the one in Egypt. That's the one that's going to be of most important to us. Inside Alexandria, he has a library built. This library will house all the great stories that he was taught as a boy, like all of Aristotle's works, Homer's works, like everything that was Greek. He wanted it to all be concentrated here, along with Babylonian tales and later Indian stories. Like he wanted it all to be this like hub of cultural diffusion here. And eventually, while he doesn't see it through, he's going to die before Alexandria is really like finished. He gets it started, gets it moving on this path, and here's your library. Now, he goes through and defeats the Persians. He goes through the Hindu Kush mountains all the way into India. Some say he actually meets Chandragupta Maurya, who will later found the Mauryan Empire. And so, like, he's got all of these great tales. He fights against elephants. Eventually, Bucephalus dies in that conflict, by the way. Alexander pushes to the edge of the world. He comes out of the Indus River, even into the Indian Ocean. He believes that he has seen the end of the world. And they said when he did, they said when he saw how large and vast his empire was, he wept. For there were no more worlds to conquer. What a powerful, powerful quote. So what does he mean by this, right? Like what does he feel here? I don't exactly know because I'm not a conqueror of all the known world. But what I can say is like I think that he achieved excellence. You see, historians say that he was consumed by pathos, which is like this deep yearning for more. And when he realized when he got to the end, there was nothing left for him. There was no more. He had done everything that he had set out to do, and there was nothing left for him to conquer. And he was a conqueror. He was not some diplomat like Darius, a politician skilled in the ways of navigating. He was decent at it, but that wasn't his forte. His forte was conquering, exploring, seeing more, and now there's nothing left for him. And I think that scared him. I think that scared him. In his end of his days, he settles in Babylon, which is the center of his empire. And Macedonians, whenever they celebrate, they drink. And some people can drink alcohol a little bit, and some people just can't have enough. And Alexander fell into that other category. And they said Alexander, got into these like heavy drinking spouts, and then something happened. His best friend, the one that was with him the whole time throughout all of his conquests, Hephaestion dies. We think it's due to typhus, a disease. And Alexander didn't know how to cope with that. With Hephaestion's death, he lost himself, and he just drank more and more and more. And if you've ever been around someone who has addiction, alcoholism in particular, it's horrific to watch this slow sort of decay of a person that was once powerful and strong, perhaps even godlike, according to the people that were around him. In the end, Alexander dies in front of all of his men, his generals that remained. His generals, by the way, after his death, will fight with one another, bicker with one another, and take and split apart the Macedonian Empire. Really sad end to the story for Alexander the Great. So here's your story card, and I'll just put it up here for you so that you have it all. This story is excellent for an enduring issues essay. Kind of summarizes for you all the pieces so that you can put it together. Maybe you can work the Hephaestion angle a little bit more. But ultimately, the most powerful man in the world taken down by a bottle. What an interesting story. So, notes to kind of end this whole thing. We'll talk about some pieces of what Alexander did that I wasn't able to do in the story. So here we go. Recap. Macedonia is in the north of Greece. Philip is the king that births Alexander. Sires Alexander, I should say. And once Alexander is born, he kind of has to grow up quick because his father's assassinated. We talked about, the Olympia angle. In the end, he takes over, and he's got to grow up real quick. Luckily, he's got some good teachers like Leonidas and Aristotle. So together, remember, not of 300, that's not the Leonidas. Together, they make Alexander ready for battle. And by the way, throughout his whole life, he would actually write back to Aristotle and tell him all the great things that he's seeing, because Aristotle, I think he put into him like a curiosity and that pathos that we're going to talk about in a second. So, what is pathos? It's like this intense, kind of addictive, like feeling for something that you don't have yet. It's a want for more. And so some historians say that's what drove Alexander, and I'm inclined to agree with them. Though the thing is like, what is it that he does not yet possess? Is it to see what Aristotle called ocean, the end of the world? And this is an old map, right? This is like what they thought the world was like before. So just ocean around land. So when he got to the ocean, he got to the end of the Indus River, and he's like, at the end of this world that he had known. It's like, okay, well, what next? What do I do next? Perhaps it's the glory on the battlefield. It could just be as simple as that he had gone so used to conquering, and then now there's nothing left to conquer. What do you do now? Or perhaps maybe that pathos was that he wanted to create that interconnected world, a world of cultures mixing and creating one beautiful empire. Perhaps it's that. I don't know the answer, by the way, just throwing out ideas. So, why is he called the Great? Again, we've talked about all of this stuff, right? But he goes through, creates the most massive land empire the world had ever known. It won't be matched until the Mongols later on in history. He goes as far as Pakistan, pushing into India, by the way. He did push into India. He just never really held it for very long. But to be able to get that far is quite incredible. He eventually will die from a bunch of different things. He was wounded in battle, he has a horrible fever, and then to compound it, he's only drinking more and more wine, and that altogether just puts an end to Alexander. I think he had a really hard time coping with the death of Hephaestion. They said when Hephaestion died, he built this like massive statue, told people that Hephaestion was a god. They think Hephaestion probably was going to be Alexander's next in line to be in succession of him. He did have a wife. He had a couple wives, but one of his wives, Roxanne, had a son, but he was young. He was a baby, so he thought Hephaestion might be like the next in line if Alexander were to die. And when Hephaestion dies, well, now there's no succession line. A baby can't rule the empire. So let's talk about the legacy now. So that's the Sarissa, by the way. Those were created by Philip, but used very, very strategically by Alexander to basically create the Macedonian empire that was. When he conquered people, he brought them into his army. This will be a feature of later empires, but Alexander's kind of the start of that. The Persians would do it too, and certainly that was a fixture of Persian rule, because they would take in different people from different places, and Alexander embodies that and makes that a feature of his Macedonian army. So he had archers from this place, cavalry from this place. He basically just take the best of each place that he conquered, and he absorbed it into his empire and into his army. He made sure to spread culture, unify culture, mix culture. We call this Hellenism, right? Hellenistic culture is Greek culture. So the Hellenes are the Greeks, and that kind of etymologically relates to Helen of Troy, most beautiful. They kind of are calling themselves the beautiful people through this. They would call themselves Hellenes. They wouldn't have called themselves Greeks. So Hellenism is the spread of culture and mixing of culture. So it's taking some of the Greek culture, the Persian culture, the Indian culture, mixing it all together and spreading it across the empire. He used libraries to accomplish this. For example, the Library of Alexandria, which unfortunately burned down, so we lost a lot of the works of Alexander. That's why some of the history is really hard to sort of put together in spots. Ultimately, I told you how the empire split apart to the different generals. That's what all these guys are. So all these different generals sort of took over their different territories and pieces. Alexander, for his part, tried to keep unity through marriage, and so he married Macedonians with Persians. Now, eventually, when the Macedonians have to go back to their homeland, that's going to make for a really awkward stage for a lot of them because they had Macedonian wives, and then they had these Asian wives of these Persian wives, and so like that's like super awkward, and a lot of the Persian wives had to stay back. So it just shows you that the diversity that he wanted to create in his brain would have been beautiful, but in practice was just a lot harder to create. And the Macedonians, some of them didn't want this mixing of cultures and thought of the Persians as separate and wanted to keep their culture separate. So this was the war that he fought throughout his entire reign. He was smart. If a system worked, like the tribute system of the Persians, he kept it, used it, and encouraged it. And it's part of the reason why he was so wealthy. And he had this whole unit called the successors, which were going to be these young Persians who were drilled and marching in Macedonian ways, spoke Greek. Like he wanted them to be the next in line. His idea was to have a few loyal Macedonians inside this much larger Persian army and kind of have the Macedonians as the generals, but also the teachers of this new Persian group, because a lot of the Macedonians were done fighting. They didn't want to keep like expanding this empire and this war, and so he knew this and basically had the next in line coming. And if he had stayed alive, he probably would have conquered all of Saudi Arabia. I mean, all of the south too. So last thing, this is like region stuff. Like, what do you need to know about Alexander? The last sort of thing is Hellenism. So this graphic is going to be on your exam, so you should be able to see it, right? It's this blending of culture and spread of culture. It is cultural diffusion. Alexander is the great cultural diffusionist. I think he wanted to create this one beautiful empire where all of these cultures could mix with one another. It would work for him as a leader. It made him powerful. But ultimately, he was not able to see this to its conclusion. We always think of like today's empire or today's world as like a really interconnected world, but Alexander had done something that no one had ever been able to do. He created this interconnected world in a time where you had to walk places, right? Like march places. There is no internet, and he was able to do it. And I think that in that way, kind of changed human history forever. So. That's the lecture on Alexander the Great and the Greeks. I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope that it helps you review or preview our notes on Alexander and Macedonia. Thanks for listening, guys. Mr. Casey out.